Where were you last night, Vincent? I asked as I watched my husband of 23 years fumble with his gym bag on the kitchen counter. I told you, Karen, I had to stay late with a client. She needed extra help with her flexibility training, he said, keeping his eyes glued to his protein shake instead of to me. Something in the way he said flexibility training made my stomach twist. At 47, I wasn't clueless. And after 15 years in human resources at Brightrise Systems, I could read a lie from across a conference table. Vincent's lies were getting easier to spot, avoiding eye contact, that nervous throat clearing, and the strongest clue of all, the faint vanilla perfume clinging to his workout clothes. It definitely wasn't mine. That's 3 nights this week, Vince. Business must really be booming at Sundale Fitness, I said, stirring my coffee slowly. At 52, Vincent had always taken pride in his body. Even with gray at his temples and deeper laugh lines, he still turned heads at the gym where he worked as a trainer. Lately, though, the heads turning seemed younger and younger, and his excuses were getting flimsier. You know how it is. Summer's coming. Everyone wants to get in shape, he said, giving me the kind of quick forehead kiss that had replaced real affection years ago. And hey, the extra money will help with the house payments. I watched through the kitchen window as his pickup rumbled to life in our driveway in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert sun was already blazing at 8 a.m. in the morning, promising another brutal day. As he backed out, I noticed something that made the air around me feel colder than our AC ever could. He was humming. Vincent only hummed when he was truly happy. And it certainly wasn't because of our little conversation. That evening, I decided I needed answers. While Vincent was in the shower, I slipped out to his truck. The metal was still hot from the summer sun as I opened the driver's side door. Inside, the mix of his cologne and something sweeter, definitely feminine, hit me immediately. I felt under the seats, checked the glove compartment, and searched for anything that might back up the suspicion that had been nagging at me. Then my fingers brushed against something small and tube-shaped wedged beneath the driver's seat. I pulled it out and stared at it under the dim garage light. Personal lubricant. The expensive kind. The kind we hadn't used in years, not since our intimate life had dried up as much as the Arizona desert around us. My hands shook slightly as I held the proof of what my heart had already known. I sat in my car in the garage for several minutes, just staring at the tube in my hands. 23 years of marriage, and this is where we had ended up. I thought about all the signs I had brushed aside. The new clothes, the sudden obsession with protein supplements that claimed to boost energy and vitality, the extra loads of laundry, the long showers. Vincent had always been charming. That charm was what pulled me in when we first met at a community college fitness class in 2001. I was 24, fresh out of my human resources degree program, and he was 29, already working as a trainer and dreaming about owning his own gym someday. He had this gift for making people feel important. He could be helping an older woman figure out the elliptical or showing a nervous teenager how to lift weights correctly. And he gave both of them the same warm attention. Back then, I loved that about him. I loved how excited he was about helping people transform their bodies and their confidence. 2 years later, we got married in a small ceremony at a resort in Sedona, surrounded by red rocks and big dreams. For a long time, we talked about having kids, maybe moving into a bigger house, maybe even opening that gym he always talked about. But then life happened. The gym never came to be because Vincent could never save enough or stick to a business plan. Kids didn't happen either because we could never agree on the right time, and before we knew it, we were in our 40s, and those conversations just faded away. The bigger house stayed a dream while we struggled to keep up with the mortgage on our modest 3-bedroom ranch near Camelback Mountain. About 6 months ago, I started noticing changes. Vincent began working later and taking on more clients, which should have been good news for us. But instead of coming home exhausted, he came home almost glowing. He bought new workout clothes, high-end brands I had never heard of. He upgraded his phone and suddenly treated it like a fragile secret, taking it with him everywhere, keeping it face down during dinner. Then came the phone calls he would step outside to answer, always blaming client scheduling. And then there was the way he talked about one client in particular, a young woman named Kylie, who was really dedicated and needed his specialized attention. I had never been a jealous person. In our early years, I was confident in our relationship and even felt proud when other women noticed him. But this was different. This felt like he was drifting away from me, one late training session at a time. And the worst part was how he tried to make me feel unreasonable for noticing. When I asked about the perfume smell, he blamed gym cleaning supplies. When I mentioned the new clothes, he said his old ones were worn out. When I questioned the late nights, he acted like I was being controlling and unsupportive of his work. But now I had proof, real, physical proof, that my instincts had been right all along. I slipped the tube into my pocket and headed back inside, my mind spinning with possibilities. I could confront him right away, but I knew Vincent well enough to predict how that would go. He'd deny everything, twist the story, and probably get angry that I had looked through his truck. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but that felt both expensive and humiliating. So instead, I leaned on what my human resources background had taught me to do when dealing with difficult workplace situations: gather information, observe patterns, and plan a strategic response. Over the next few days, I became a quiet detective in my own home. I started watching Vincent's routine closely. He worked late every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, always walking through the door around 10 p.m. with the same explanation: his dedicated client, Kylie. He was always freshly showered when he arrived home, claiming the gym's showers were better than ours. His phone buzzed nonstop, and he would casually say it was just fitness app notifications. I also took my investigation online. It didn't take long to find Kylie Morrison on Instagram. She was 23 years old, blonde, and had the kind of dramatically enhanced curves that suggested not only good genetics, but also a talented surgeon. Her profile was filled with gym selfies and inspirational quotes about living your best life, and age is just a number. Recently, she had begun posting workout videos, always shot from flattering angles, highlighting both her form and the strong hands adjusting her posture. Those hands were unmistakably Vincent's, even though his face rarely made it into the frame. I recognized his voice encouraging her, his laugh when she joked, and the way he corrected her technique. I had lived with those hands and that voice for over 20 years. I knew them better than anyone. The videos were always uploaded on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings, the exact times Vincent claimed he was helping her with flexibility training. The comment sections were full of fire emojis, flirty remarks, and men begging for personal training spots. Kylie replied to some of them with winky faces and lines like, "My trainer is the best. He really knows how to work out all the kinks." But the moment that pushed me over the edge came from a video posted the previous Friday. It wasn't filmed on the gym floor. It looked like it was shot inside a private studio, or maybe an apartment. Kylie was doing stretches that looked more suited for an adult entertainment audition than any normal fitness routine. And then I heard it. Vincent's voice, loud and clear in the background. "That's perfect, baby. Hold that position for me." Baby. He called her baby. I sat in my office at Bright Rise Systems, pretending to review employee files, but my mind was nowhere near work. Instead, I was mapping out how I was going to respond to Vincent's betrayal. I could have chosen the classy approach. I could have quietly packed my things, filed for divorce, and walked away like a rational adult. I could have confronted both of them and demanded answers or apologies, but I wasn't interested in taking the high road. If Vincent wanted to play around with tubes of lubricant, then fine. He had just invited me into the game. Only, this time, I was going to choose the rules. And I intended to make sure everyone involved learned a lesson they would never forget. That Saturday morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. Vincent was still asleep beside me, snoring softly like he didn't have a single worry in his life. I slipped out of bed and headed to the kitchen, started my day with a cup of coffee, and wrote out a very specific shopping list. My first stop was Home Depot. I walked through the aisles with the confidence of someone on a mission. In the adhesive section, I found exactly what I needed. Gorilla Glue, professional grade. The kind that forms an instant, permanent bond that usually requires industrial solvents, or, in extreme situations, medical intervention, to remove. The teenage cashier barely glanced up as he rang up my purchase. "Working on a project?" he asked, sounding about as bored as someone earning minimum wage on a Saturday morning. "You could say that," I replied with a pleasant smile. "Something that needs to stick forever." My next stop was a medical supply store where I bought a large syringe, the kind usually used for giving medication to livestock. The clerk asked if I had horses, and I told her I was helping a friend with her ranch animals. Another small lie in what had become a very strategic operation. When I got home, Vincent was in the shower, getting ready for what he claimed was a Saturday morning session with a new client who supposedly could only train on weekends. I could hear him humming again, that same happy, satisfied sound that now made my skin crawl. I went straight to the kitchen and got to work, moving quickly and carefully. Using the syringe, I extracted every last drop of lubricant from the tube I had found in his truck. Then, with the kind of precision you pick up after years of managing employee benefits and workplace safety procedures, I refilled the empty tube with Gorilla Glue. The textures were surprisingly similar, and once I resealed the tube, it looked completely untouched. Unless someone squeezed it out and examined it closely, they would never realize anything was different. I wiped it clean, removing every fingerprint, and slid it back under Vincent's driver's seat exactly where I had found it. My heart raced. Part adrenaline, part satisfaction. This wasn't just about exposing a cheater. This was about making sure the consequences of his choices were immediate, impossible to deny, and impossible to forget. Vincent came out of the shower looking more like he was headed to a photo shoot than a training session. His beard was neatly trimmed. He had drenched himself in the expensive cologne I bought him for Christmas, and he was wearing a brand new workout outfit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Big session today?" I asked casually, keeping my eyes on my crossword puzzle. "Yeah, this new client is really motivated. Might take a few hours," he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror for the third time. "Well, you certainly look motivated too," I said, letting a hint of sarcasm slip through. He leaned down and gave me that same perfunctory kiss on the top of my head, the one that had replaced any real affection. "Love you, babe. Don't wait up if I'm late." I watched him walk out. And the moment his truck turned down the street, I moved on to phase 2 of my plan. I called his mother, Doris, who lived about 20 minutes away in Scottsdale. "Doris, it's Karen. Are you busy today? I was thinking we could have a girls' day. Maybe brunch and pedicures?" Doris was thrilled. At 74, she didn't get out as much as she used to, and she had always liked me more than Vincent probably deserved. Lately, she'd been dropping hints about how her son seemed different, and how she hoped he was treating me properly. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Should I pick you up?" "Actually, I'll come get you. I need to get out of the house for a bit." "Perfect." And just like that, my alibi was set. I would be nowhere near the scene when Vincent and his flexibility student discovered my little edit to their afternoon routine. I picked up Doris at noon and we drove to a trendy brunch spot in Old Town Scottsdale. She wore one of her bright pantsuits and had clearly taken her time getting ready. She was excited. Maybe more excited than I deserved to drag her into this, even indirectly. A small pang of guilt hit me, but I reminded myself that if everything played out the way I expected, she would eventually learn the truth about her son's behavior. "You look lovely today, Karen, but you seem a little tense. Is everything all right with you and Vincent?" Doris asked, peering over her reading glasses as she looked at the menu. "Oh, you know how it is. Marriage has its ups and downs," I said lightly, taking a sip of my mimosa. "Vincent's been working a lot lately. Lots of new clients who need extra attention." "Hmm," Doris said, and there was something in her tone that made me lift my eyes from my menu. "He's always been popular with the ladies, even as a boy. Sometimes I worry he got too much of his father's charm and not enough of his sense." It was the most direct she had ever been about Vincent's flaws, and it caught me off guard. I had always assumed she overlooked his behavior the way many mothers do. "Has he mentioned anything to you about work lately?" I asked carefully. "He said something about a young woman taking up a lot of his time," she replied. "Said she was very dedicated but needed specialized training." Doris paused, then leaned back with a knowing look. I've lived long enough to know what specialized training usually means when it involves pretty young women and men having a midlife crisis. I nearly choked on my mimosa. "Doris." "Oh, honey, I'm not blind," she said, waving her hand. "Vincent's father went through the same thing when he turned 50. Started buying sports cars and dating his secretary." She reached across the table and gently patted my hand. "The difference is, you're not the kind of woman who puts up with nonsense, and Vincent isn't smart enough to see what he's about to lose." We spent the next 2 hours talking about anything and everything except Vincent's cheating, though it lingered in the space between us like heavy desert heat. Doris told stories about her late husband's affairs and how she had handled them with a blend of grace and strategic retaliation that impressed me more than I wanted to admit. "The key," she said as we walked toward the nail salon, "is to make sure the punishment fits the crime, and that they learn something from it. Men like Vincent and his father think they're so clever, but they're just predictable." At 3:15 p.m., while we sat side by side having our toenails painted in matching coral pink, my phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Session running long. Probably won't be home until late. Don't wait up." I showed the message to Doris, who didn't even try to hide her eye roll. "Right on schedule," she said. His father used to send me the exact same kinds of messages. A strange calm settled over me as I stared at the screen. By now, Vincent and Kylie were likely deep into their flexibility training. I pictured them in whatever private spot they thought was so discreet, convinced they were clever and invisible. And then I imagined Vincent reaching for his special lubricant, completely unaware that his wife had turned his secret weapon into the perfect consequence. "You know what, Doris?" I said, leaning back in my pedicure chair. "I think today is going to be a very good day." She smiled at me with the confidence of a woman who had seen this story unfold before and already knew the ending. By 4 p.m., Doris and I were wandering through an antique shop in Old Town, looking at vintage jewelry and trading stories from our younger years. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Receipts, witnesses, timestamps, all forming a flawless alibi. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Vincent. It was a notification from the neighborhood app. Someone nearby had reported unusual emergency vehicle activity. My heartbeat picked up, but I kept my face relaxed and continued examining a vintage bracelet. "Oh my," Doris said, checking her own phone. "My neighbor is posting about fire trucks in your area. I hope everything's all right." "Fire trucks?" I repeated, putting just the right touch of concern in my voice. "I really hope none of our neighbors are dealing with some kind of emergency." We wrapped up our shopping and I drove Doris home, keeping the conversation light and doing my best not to stare at my phone every 2 minutes. When we finally pulled up to her house, she squeezed my hand before stepping out. "Whatever comes next, dear," she said softly, "remember that you deserve better than what you've been getting. And sometimes the universe has a way of giving people exactly what they've earned." The drive back to my neighborhood felt both endless and strangely fast at the same time. As soon as I turned onto my street, I saw a cluster of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Most of them were holding their phones, whispering to each other with that unmistakable energy that only real scandal creates. The emergency vehicles were gone, but the buzz of drama was still thick in the air. I parked in my driveway and headed over to my neighbor Janet, who looked like she was seconds away from bursting with excitement. "Karen, you just missed the chaos," she practically sang. "The fire department had to respond to that Airbnb house 3 doors down. Apparently 2 people got stuck together during—" She paused dramatically. "Intimate activities." "Stuck together?" I repeated, raising my eyebrows with genuine curiosity. "Some kind of adhesive accident," she said, lowering her voice even though everyone on the block could hear. "The paramedics couldn't separate them, so the fire department had to bring in special equipment. They carried them out on stretchers, still attached, covered in bed sheets. It was like something out of a movie." Another neighbor, Bob, jumped into the conversation. "My wife got the whole thing on her Ring camera. They're saying it might go viral. The guy looked familiar, though. Isn't he that trainer from the gym on 32nd Street? My heart felt like it skipped a beat. Not from fear, but from an overwhelming mix of satisfaction and disbelief. It had worked. It had actually worked. And even better than I expected. "The trainer from Sundale Fitness?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and innocent. "I think my husband works there. I hope it wasn't anyone we know." "Hard to tell under the bed sheets," Janet said, "but whoever it was is going to have a whole lot of explaining to do. The fire chief said they'd never seen anything like it. Whatever they used was industrial strength." I excused myself politely and went inside. My hands were trembling just a little as I closed the front door behind me. Standing in the quiet of my kitchen, I finally let myself feel it. Pure, unfiltered satisfaction. Vincent had spent months believing he was clever, discreet, and so much smarter than his boring wife, who spent her days dealing with employee benefits and workplace safety policies. But he forgot one important thing. His boring wife was excellent at handling situations that required planning, precision, and a very clear understanding of consequences. My phone rang. Vincent's name flashed across the screen, and I let it go straight to voicemail. Then he called again, and again. I calmly made myself a cup of tea and settled in, ready for whatever ridiculous explanation he was going to try to come up with. Vincent finally came through the door at 8 p.m., nearly 3 hours later than his usual return time. He walked in stiffly, like every movement hurt. His hair was a mess, his clothes were definitely not the ones he left the house in, and his face was a mix of embarrassment, anxiety, and sheer panic. And I just stood there, watching him, knowing exactly why he looked that way. "Hey, babe," he said, trying to sound casual, though the effort showed in every word. "How is your day with my mom?" "Wonderful," I answered, keeping my eyes on my book. "We had brunch, got pedicures, did a little shopping. Very relaxing." I paused just long enough before adding, "How was your training session?" I could practically see him deciding how much to lie. His jaw tightened, loosened, then tightened again before he finally settled on, "It was challenging. Had to cut it short because of an emergency." "Oh no," I said, full of gentle concern. "What kind of emergency? I hope your client is all right." She'll be fine. Just a minor accident at the gym. Nothing serious." The beauty of this moment was knowing he couldn't tell the truth without exposing the affair, But he also couldn't invent a convincing lie that explained why he looked like he'd just survived a medical disaster. He was caught between guilt and ego, and watching him try to wiggle out of it was more satisfying than I expected. "That's terrible. What kind of accident?" I asked, keeping my tone soft. "Just equipment malfunction. The gym's dealing with it, insurance and all that." He was sweating, even though the air conditioner was running. "I'm going to take a shower." "Good idea," I replied sweetly. "Oh, by the way, Janet mentioned there was some excitement in the neighborhood today. Fire trucks and ambulances at that Airbnb down the street. Some kind of unusual emergency." Vincent froze mid-step, his face drained of color. "Really? Huh. Didn't didn't hear about that. She said two people got stuck together somehow. Can you imagine? What are the odds of something like that happening on the same day you had an equipment malfunction at work?" His expression was priceless, pure fear mixed with the slow, horrifying suspicion that maybe, just maybe, his wife knew far more than she was admitting. Over the next few days, the full disaster revealed itself. The Ring camera footage had gone viral, millions of views across every major platform. Even though Vincent and Kylie's faces were covered by sheets, enough small details were visible that people in the local fitness community identified them almost immediately. Sundale Fitness fired Vincent on the spot, citing a morals clause and the negative publicity. Several of his clients canceled their sessions, not wanting to be tied to the scandal. Kylie, who had been trying to grow her social media presence as a fitness influencer, found her posts flooded with comments about being stuck on her trainer and getting really bonded during workouts. Local news stations picked up the story as a humorous human interest piece. While they didn't name names, the anchors could barely keep straight faces as they described it as a cautionary tale about reading labels carefully and a reminder that some workout equipment requires professional handling. Vincent managed to deny everything for exactly 3 days before the humiliation, gossip, and online jokes finally broke him down. He confessed while I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, with the calm patience of someone who already knew every detail. "It just happened, Karen," he said hopelessly. "I didn't plan it. She was just so young and enthusiastic, and you and I have been distant for so long, and she made me feel like I was still attractive and vital." "And the lubricant under your truck seat?" I asked quietly. His face collapsed. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to make an informed decision about our marriage," I said, sliding the divorce papers across the table toward him. The satisfaction I felt watching him realize that his affair had been discovered, documented, and carefully dealt with was worth every hour I spent planning. Seeing the truth hit him all at once, knowing he had no way to undo any of it, was its own kind of justice. Vincent's infidelity, and the humiliating way it became public, cost him far more than just our marriage. News traveled fast in Phoenix's close fitness community, and soon no gym wanted to be associated with him. Personal training jobs dried up completely. Eventually, he had to settle for a position at a big box store, stocking shelves for a small fraction of what he used to earn. Kylie disappeared from social media almost overnight and moved back to Ohio to live with her parents. Her budding influencer career collapsed under a wave of jokes, screenshots, and memes that never seemed to stop. The viral video followed both of them everywhere, an unshakable reminder of their decisions and their mistake in underestimating a woman they assumed was too dull to fight back. They learned, very publicly, that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come with industrial-strength adhesive. In the divorce, I kept the house, and I used my share of Vincent's retirement savings to finally take the Italy trip I'd dreamed about for years. One evening, as I sat at a cafe in Rome, watching the sunset spill across ancient stone streets and sipping wine that cost more than Vincent now made in an entire day, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone's life. It's about precision. It's about patience. And it's about making sure justice sticks, with exactly the right amount of permanence.